Seriously, again. We just went through this. Okay, once again, here's the intro. Hey Internet, my name is Jeff and I'm a pastor and we're doing something new today. I thought that I'd start a new series that we'll revisit from time to time where we talk about the events, the things Jesus did and some of the things that he said that were maybe a little bit confusing, off-brand, maybe even a little bit awkward and troubling. And I figured that we would call this series
Dang, Jesus!
So yeah, after we read the passage that we're going to be talking about today, you actually have to say that out loud wherever you are, even if you have headphones in and you're in public. All right, so here we go. Today we are looking at Matthew chapter 21, verses 12 through 13. And once again, I could have had it ready. By the way, if you hear any noise, it's been windy here in North Carolina, and we have this like tent gazebo thing in our backyard that totally blew apart, and now it's flapping all over the place, and our neighbors and HOA love us. Okay, so Matthew chapter 21, verses 12 through 13. Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who were selling and buying in the temple, and he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. He said to them, "It is written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer,' but you are making it a den of robbers." And then in one of the other accounts of this story in the Gospel of John, we're actually told that Jesus did this after fashioning whips out of cords that were around the temple, and he actually chased people out of the temple with whips. So again, how can you read this and not say,
Dang, Jesus!
I mean, it's a lot, right? It seems a little bit off-brand for Jesus. Now, I have more than once, and in fact very often, heard the interpretation of this passage that basically goes something like, "And this is why we don't sell things in the foyer of the church." Right? That's the justification that people use for not, having a bake sale or kicking Aunt Gertie out of the church foyer for trying to sell her cookbooks is this passage. So I think that there's a little bit more going on to this passage, so I want to talk about that. And I want to start with the fact that this is mentioned in all four Gospels, and in three of them, Matthew, Mark, and John, doves are mentioned. It specifically mentioned that Jesus overturns the seats of the people who are selling doves. Why is this so interesting? Well, if you take a look at Leviticus chapter 14, verse 30, you find that there are all sorts of animal sacrifices that people used to worship in the ancient world. And animal sacrifices could get, kind of expensive if you're sacrificing lambs and bulls and all kinds of other things. And so there's a concession that's made in Leviticus 14:30 that says, oh, by the way, if you can't afford the animals for these offerings, just buy a pigeon or a dove. You see, what that verse, that concession is doing in Leviticus is basically saying nobody should be kicked out of worship or precluded from worshiping God just because they're poor or vulnerable. So if the best you can do is a dove that went for 2 cents, then yeah, absolutely. Of course, you can just sacrifice a dove. Now, over time, people started traveling from long distances to worship at the temple. And what people would do over time is take advantage of these travelers. And during the high holidays, they would jack up the prices of the doves, and it would end up meaning that the poor people who had traveled all the way from Galilee or wherever, 30, 40, 50, 60 miles away just to worship at the temple during the holidays, they couldn't do it because they couldn't afford the doves anymore because the prices had been jacked up. I don't know. I think about how when my family and I used to travel to Boston from upstate New York where I lived, and the cheeseburgers at McDonald's that cost 69 cents at home, on the Mass Pike they cost like $7. Right? It's kind of the same concept and kind of terrible, especially since it was taking advantage of the poor. See, what Jesus is actually railing against here isn't Aunt Gertie selling her cookbooks in the church foyer. Instead, what Jesus is railing against is religious institutions that lose sight of taking care of the poor and vulnerable and actually start to take advantage of the poor and the vulnerable. Jesus was at his most angry when he saw a religious institution taking advantage of vulnerable people rather than protecting them. And that should probably tell us something. It should probably tell us something about the religious institutions that are around us, and it should tell us something very important about Jesus and his character and the character of God that his life reflected. A religious institution that tries to keep the vulnerable at bay, or tries to exclude them as much as possible, or makes it difficult for vulnerable people to enter into the full worship of God, that's the kind of thing that Jesus was railing against. And it wasn't the religious institutions that allow Aunt Gertie to sell her cookbooks in the church foyer. This passage isn't about Jesus trying to make more rules for us about what's holy or where is holy or what makes it holy. No, this is a passage that warns religious institutions to pay very close attention to how they treat the most vulnerable people in their communities. And that's a message that I think is way more interesting than, Aunt Gertie, go sell your cookbook somewhere else. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. Sorry if you have an Aunt Gertie, by the way. Click like and subscribe. Click dislike if you have an Aunt Gertie. Actually, I probably deserved that. Click like, subscribe, click the bell so that you'll be notified whenever a new video comes out, although you can be pretty sure that they'll come out sometime on Tuesday mornings usually. And that's it for this week. See you all in the next one. Grace and peace.